Welcome aboard to Carry On, our weekly roundup of aviation and business travel news with Nevil Gibson. Lufthansa is sprucing up its jumbos. What are the main features?
Well, it's unusual that Lufthansa bought the last lot of jumbo jets that they ever made, and they're going to be upgrading them. Now, this is a big upgrade of the cabins to a new class of first class and business class called Allegis. But the interesting thing is they're not going to upgrade the A380s. They've already... the new aircraft they're buying, B777s and A350s, are also going to have these new cabins. But the interesting thing about the jumbo jet is that it'll become probably the flagship of the Lufthansa fleet. There's only about a dozen of them, and they're fairly recent. But manufacturing stopped in 2016, so these will be about 10 years old. So it's an interesting one for aviation people who like to travel on the old jumbo because it's still there, the queen of the skies.
And British Airways is bringing business class suites to Australia?
Well, when you look at what Lufthansa is doing with its cabins, it's upgrading first class and business class, giving people sliding doors, more privacy, all beds, reclining, sleeping, that sort of thing. And British Airways are doing the same thing. They're going to be introducing it to their longest haul flight, which is from Sydney to Singapore to Sydney, and they've introduced them just in the past week. So there's quite a lot of competition in this area to upgrade both business class and first class from these European airlines.
And Air Canada has ordered some more Airbus A220s. How many does it have now?
Well, it's got a total. This will bring the total orders to 60. Air Canada was the first operator of the A220 because it used to be a Bombardier aircraft before Airbus took it over, and they're the largest operator. This is a slightly smaller version of the A320, but it was completely designed in Canada and is a different aircraft altogether, although it's got the Airbus label on it. And Air Canada is using these for both its transcontinental flights across Canada, of course, but also down to Latin America and not yet across the Pacific to New Zealand. They've got larger aircraft for that, but this is the workhorse of the Air Canada fleet.
Now, a major engine maker has pulled out of a supersonic aircraft project. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, this is the Boom Supersonic, which has been referred to several times on NBR, and they're building the supersonic aircraft, but they haven't really got an engine to go with it. But a number of major aircraft makers, engine makers like Rolls-Royce, Pratt & Whitney, have looked into the project. Now CFM, which is a joint venture between General Electric and Sanofi, have also decided to pull out. So this leaves Boom Supersonic, which is based in Colorado, without really an engine maker to go with the project. It's going to take several years, of course, but they say that they are still talking to some engine makers, but there's been a lot of industry doubt about whether this aircraft will ever be made, let alone take off. But there are orders from both United and American Airlines that they want the Supersonic Keycraft.
And what do you think? Will it ever get off the ground?
Well, keeping an eye on it. The thing about a supersonic aircraft like this one can fly between New York and London in just 4 hours. So that's the real appeal. But of course, the cost of doing that is going to be quite high.
Now, Qantas has canned some of its international flights from Perth. Why is that?
Well, there's a running dispute between Qantas, which has its own terminal in Perth called T3, and the international terminal run by the airport. Qantas wants to run all of its international flights out of Terminal 3, but it really hasn't got the facilities to handle a big lot of traffic. So they've now, although they've resumed a Perth to Johannesburg service, it's going to end at the end of March and it's not going to start again. And plans to have a flight from Perth to Jakarta have been canned for that reason. And instead, Terminal 3 will be used mainly for extra flights up to Singapore.
And these routes that they're canned, are they planning to bring them back once they've resumed?
Well, it'll depend on getting agreement between the airport authority and Qantas over the use of Terminal 3, because obviously the airport don't want to have effectively two international terminals, because T3 also handles all of Qantas's domestic travel, but it's only got limited ability to handle international flights.
And finally, Qatar Airways has increased its Auckland flights. What will this mean?
Well, Qatar Airways is pretty heavily committed to the FIFA World Cup with its aircraft, but it's going to, from December and January, it's going to boost flights to many of its popular routes. And one of those is Doha to Auckland via Adelaide. That runs at 5 times a week at the moment. That's going to be increased to daily. That's 7 times. They're also going to be boosting their flights to quite a number of places in Asia, Africa and Europe. So that's a pretty big hub now for New Zealand travellers, being one of the main routes through the Gulf before Emirates comes back with its added capacity.
Nevil, thanks very much for coming in.
Pleasure.